The thing that reshaped warfare, leveled empires, and gave mortals the power of gods was not forged in a weaponsmith's fire, nor was it born from the will of a conqueror. Many still believe that Alfred Nobel, the father of dynamite, was its inventor. They confuse modern explosives with the ancient black powder that changed history. But the truth is wilder than any fiction. The origins of the most destructive force humanity ever created lie in a desire as pure as it was naive. Immortality. Imagine. Not a warrior or a 19th century Swedish scientist, but 9th century Chinese Taoist alchemists obsessed with escaping the cycle of life and death. In their smoke-filled laboratories, they sought not weapons. They sought the elixir of life. They mixed mystical ingredients, sulfur, charcoal, and saltpeter, murmuring incantations, praying for a miracle to live forever. But a fatal mistake was made. Instead of opening the gates to heaven, they found the recipe to hell. The black powder they created did not bring eternal life. It brought instant death. What we call gunpowder, not Nobel's dynamite. This is not just a story of an invention. This is the story of history's greatest mistake. A secret that leaked from a Chinese alchemy lab spread along the Silk Road, became a demon-sowing terror on the battlefields of Europe and Mongolia, and finally became the tool that shaped our modern world. It is the clearest mirror reflecting humanity. The desire to create and the lust to destroy, all held in the same hand. This journey is not for the faint of heart. We will turn the forgotten pages of history, where magic transformed into science and prayers turned into explosions. If you dare to look into that mirror to face the naked truth about human nature, click subscribe and turn on notifications. Because the demon born from the dream of immortality is about to tell you its story. The unstable alchemy lab and the failed dream of eternal life. Let's forget the modern world for a moment. Forget the glowing screens, the asphalt roads, and the sound of car horns. We're turning back time. Not a few years, not a few centuries. More than 1,000 years. Back to the 9th century, during the Tang dynasty in China. A golden age where the capital Chang'an was not only the heart of the Middle Kingdom, but also the most bustling metropolis in the world. Imagine crowded streets, shimmering silks, stretching like rivers, porcelain glittering under the sun, and poetry echoing in taverns. The Silk Road was bustling. Merchants from Persia, Arabia, and India arrived, bringing gold, spices, and strange ideas. This was the center of civilization, a place where humanity proudly displayed its colors. But every light has its shadow. Behind this prosperity, a silent fear crept in. From the emperor on his throne to the high officials in their splendid mansions, all trembled before an unavoidable truth. Death. They had power, gold, and fame. But time. Time was the one thing they could not buy. Death doesn't ask who you are. It comes silently, leveling everything. And from that metaphysical fear, a mad dream was born. Immortality. To live forever. To escape the cycle of reincarnation. To become a deity. The people tasked with turning this dream into reality were not scientists in white lab coats. No, they were Taoist alchemists. Picture them, part philosopher, part physician, part mystic, and also part experimental chef. Their laboratories were alchemy furnaces hidden in mountain temples or tucked away in the private gardens of nobles. The air was thick with the smell of burning herbs, molten minerals, and fervent belief. They were not seeking to discover the physical world, wanted to transcend it. They believed that by balancing yin and yang, practicing qigong, and, most importantly, concocting an elixir of immortality, humans could break the chains of death. Put yourself in the shoes of a Taoist alchemist. Every morning you wake up in a cold stone room. The firelight from the furnace dances on the walls. You don't worry about food or clothing. Your only concern is ancient scrolls, secret formulas passed down from immortals. You believe that all things contain ki. Each thing belongs to one of the 5 elements: metal, wood, water, fire, earth. Your mission? Find the perfect formula, a pill that could make a person immortal. In the treasury of ingredients, 3 gradually became the focus. First was sulfur, brilliant yellow mineral, like imprisoned sunlight, and burned. It erupted in a ghostly blue flame, emitting a pungent odor. To you, sulfur was yang, it was fire, the power to drive away evil spirits. Second was charcoal, born from wood, carrying the energy of wood, of latent life. And third, the most mysterious, was a white salt, crystallizing brilliantly from arid lands. It was cool, salty, but when thrown into fire, it burned fiercely, like a sleeping dragon awakened. You called it saltpeter. Later, science would call it potassium nitrate. You had a premonition, intense feeling, as if the stars were whispering to you. The combination of these 3 things, the fire of sulfur, the life of charcoal, and the mystery of saltpeter, could create a great balance. You began to experiment. Carefully, step by step, you ground them in a stone mortar, where the powder was as fine as sand. The ratio was everything. You had tried hundreds of formulas, based on the Bagua, based on the position of the stars, based on last night's dreams. Finally, you chose a ratio. You believed this was the formula of the heavens. You mixed them. The grayish-black powder looked unremarkable, but you could feel it. A source of energy, a promise. You placed a little in a bronze crucible. The furnace was ready. You sat down, calmed your mind, recited incantations from ancient scriptures. You prayed for the gods to bear witness. The fire flared up. The crucible grew hot. Inside, the black powder began to transform. You waited. Your heart pounded. And then boom, deafening explosion like thunder in broad daylight. A blinding white light flashed, piercing your eyes. Terrifying force threw you backward. Black smoke billowed, carrying the smell of sulfur and a strange burnt odor. You coughed violently. Your ears rang. When the smoke cleared, you shakily sat up. The crucible was shattered. Furnace was charred. Your long beard, your pride was now singed. You looked at the chaos. There was no elixir, no divine light, only destruction. The first reaction, fear. Was this a heavenly punishment? A penalty for daring to touch the secrets of creation? Or had a demon sabotaged your furnace? You sought immortality, but what you created was death, swifter than any sword. Explosions like this were not rare. Across China, in alchemy labs, Taoists faced similar accidents. Fire, smoke, destruction, for a long time. They considered it a failure, a sign that the formula was wrong. But humans are a curious species. Amidst the fear, some alchemists began to take notes. They didn't understand chemistry. They didn't know about oxidation reactions. But they saw a pattern. Mix those 3 things, add heat, and the world would explode. An ancient book, Genuine Maya Dao Yaolu, written in the 9th century, records the earliest evidence. The author, a Taoist, described the formula: sulfur, charcoal, saltpeter. But not in a chapter about elixirs, but in a chapter of warning, he wrote. Heating a mixture of sulfur, realga, and saltpeter with honey. The result? Smoke and fire. Beards and hair burned. Houses incinerated. The first workplace accident report in history. His advice? Don't try it. But that warning was like a flame. It spread. From an accident, fire medicine became a secret to be studied in the dark. Secretly, people realized, if not burned in a confined space, it doesn't explode. It burns, fast, intensely, creating gas, creating thrust. And then, history took a turn. From the dream of immortality, fire medicine became something else. First, it was a game. People stuffed the black powder into bamboo tubes, sealed one end, lit the fuse. Whoosh. The bamboo tube flew up, like a small dragon, leaving a trail of smoke. Or thrown into a fire, creating an explosion in light. Fireworks were born. The Tang Court, it was magic, symbol of power. But the world wasn't just festivals. War was always lurking. From fireworks to weapons, it was just a short step. Military engineers saw the potential. If it could push a bamboo tube, it could push a stone. If it could create sparks, it could create a stream of fire. Human creativity and destruction is limitless. Soon fire arrows appeared, a bag of black powder tied to an arrowhead. Fired. It didn't just pierce, it burned. Then came the fire lance. A metal tube stuffed with black powder and shrapnel lit. A deadly stream of fire shot out, sowing terror. Ceramic grenades, filled with black powder, were thrown by hand or catapult. Each explosion was a declaration. Warfare had changed. Imagine you are a soldier in the 10th century. You are used to the clash of swords, the whistle of arrows. Suddenly, from the enemy's side, deafening explosions, fire spewing, iron balls exploding, shrapnel embedding itself in everything. This was no longer war. It was a nightmare. China had opened Pandora's box. The black powder, born from the dream of immortality, now became a tool of death. But a secret cannot be kept forever. Silk Road, the lifeblood of trade, became the path of fire medicine. An Arab merchant saw fireworks in Chang'an, told of it in Baghdad. A monk recorded the formula. A prisoner of war was forced to reveal it. Somehow fire medicine left China. It reached Mongolia. It reached Arabia. And then Europe. From the dream of immortality, that black powder began its journey to rewrite human history. Have you ever thought that the brilliant fireworks displays every New Year's Eve share a common origin with deadly grenades? It all began with unexpected explosions in the alchemy labs of ancient Taoists. This black powder had left its homeland. But how did a secret from an alchemy lab cross deserts and oceans to become the weapon that decided the fate of European knights? The answer lies with merchants, religious wars, and a beautiful name, Chinese snow. If you're also curious to know how that journey unfolded, subscribe to the channel to join me for part 2. Chinese snow and the symphonies of iron and steel. At the end of the previous part, we left the secret of Huyo, the magical powder that once lay dormant in the alchemy labs of Chinese Taoists, beginning to leak out along the winding Silk Road through deserts and mountains. But a secret, no matter how great, needs a catalyst, a wind to blow it far. History in its cruelty and wonder gave us the perfect catalyst, the hooves of the Mongol Empire. Picture this. In the early 13th century, the Mongol army, under the leadership of Genghis Khan and his successors, was like an unstoppable storm. They were not just warriors, they were a phenomenon, a massive wildfire consuming everything in its path, from the vast steppes of Central Asia to the fortified cities of China. They didn't just destroy, they absorbed, they learned. And when they set foot in the Song dynasty, they saw something no steppe warrior had ever imagined. Fire weapons. Fire lances that spewed flames. Ceramic grenades that exploded into 1,000 pieces. War machines that belched smoke and roared like beasts. Can you imagine? A Mongol warrior accustomed only to bows and sharp swords, witnessing for the first time a bamboo tube spewing fire, tearing through the air. It wasn't just a weapon, it was a symbol of power. And the Mongols, with their practical wisdom, did not underestimate it. What did they do? They captured the engineers, the alchemists of the Song dynasty. They forced these brilliant minds to work for them, to build weapons, to teach them the technology. These people didn't just bring knowledge, they brought the future. And as the Mongol hordes continued their sweep westward through the lands of Persia and the Middle East, they didn't just bring blood and fire, they brought smoke, they brought explosions, they brought Huyao. Put yourself in the shoes of a Muslim soldier standing on the walls of Baghdad in 1258. You've been trained to fight with bows, swords, and catapults. You are ready to face the fierce horsemen from the distant steppes. But then a strange sound rings out. Not thunder, not the neighing of horses, but a deafening boom, as if the heavens and earth were cracking open. You see bronze tubes from afar shooting out streams of red fire. Ceramic balls fly through the air, crashing into the walls and exploding, turning stone to dust, turning your comrades into fragments. Smoke is everywhere. The smell of sulfur fills your nostrils. Your heart pounds. What is this? Magic demons? Or a sign that the world you know is collapsing? You panic. But not just because of death, but because of helplessness. You, a warrior trained your whole life, suddenly feel small before this power. It's unlike anything you've ever faced. It's like the wrath of a god. The Mongol storm didn't just destroy, it was also an invisible bridge, carrying Huzhou across all borders. The technology that was once a Chinese monopoly now fell into the hands of other peoples. And one of the most fertile grounds it reached was the Arab world. While Europe was still mired in the Dark Ages, constrained by prejudice and incessant warfare, the Islamic world was shining in its golden age. Baghdad, Damascus, Cairo, these cities were not just centers of trade, but Budiba, the heart of human knowledge. Arab scholars translated the works of Aristotle and Plato and developed sciences that Europe had not yet dreamed of. Mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and especially alchemy. When the formula for Huzhou reached them, it was no longer the vague magic it was in the eyes of Mongol warriors. A puzzle. Arab alchemists dissected it, analyzing each component, each reaction. They quickly identified the heart of this powder, saltpeter. But natural saltpeter was often impure, reducing the power of the explosion. And so, with the meticulousness of true scientists, they invented methods of purification. They dissolved the saltpeter in water, filtered it, recrystallized it, creating a pure, perfect white powder. They called it Thalj Alkan, Chinese snow, a name as beautiful as poetry, expressing both admiration for its mysterious origin and evoking the image of a white, cold substance that held destructive power. When they mixed Chinese snow with sulfur and charcoal, they created barud, a Persian root word meaning gunpowder. But this was no longer the crude powder of the Song dynasty. This was a stronger, more stable, more reliable version. Imagine you are an alchemist in Damascus, sitting in a room filled with the smell of sulfur and smoke. Before you are glass jars containing the magical white powder people call Chinese snow. You have been working for months, testing every ratio, every mixing method. Every time an explosion is successful, your heart feels like it's going to jump out of your chest. It's not out of fear, but out of excitement. You know you are touching a secret of creation. This is not just a formula. This is the key to changing warfare, to changing the world. But you also ask yourself, is this power too great, too dangerous, to fall into the hands of men? The Arabs didn't just improve the formula, they also documented everything scientifically. In the late 13th century, a Syrian military engineer named Hazen al-Rama wrote the Book of Military Horsemanship and Ingenious War Devices. This book is a masterpiece. It contains over 100 recipes for gunpowder, from mixtures for grenades to formulas for rockets, and even primitive torpedoes. These were no longer the vague notes of Taoist alchemists. This was a war manual, a turning point in military history. But Chinese snow had not yet stopped. It had one final journey to conquer: the European continent. And the path to it was not one, but many, intertwined like the blood vessels of history. Imagine a European knight in shining armor, riding to the Holy Land on a crusade. He is proud of his sword, forged by the best craftsman, of his shield bearing his family crest. He believes that war is glory, is honor, a contest between brave men. But then on the battlefields of the Levant, he faces something he has never seen before. A boom. Smoke billows. Ceramic balls fly overhead, exploding into sharp fragments. Fire-spewing machines roar. He is horrified. What is this? Black magic? The intervention of demons? Or a weapon he cannot comprehend? The knights are defeated, but they do not return empty-handed. They bring back stories, whispers of the fearsome weapon of the infidels. Those stories sow the seeds of change. The Iberian Peninsula, at this time, was a strange battlefield. In the north were the Christian kingdoms. In the south, the Muslim Emirates of the Moors. Fighting was constant, but so was trade. Scholars, merchants, and spies crossed back and forth, bringing ideas and technology. It was here that Europeans first came into direct contact with gunpowder. Not through vague stories, but through real battles, where they witnessed the power of baroud in the hands of the Moors. Meanwhile, in the eastern Mediterranean, Italian city-states like Venice and Genoa were dominating global trade. Their ships were filled with silk, spices, and ideas. A merchant from Damascus might have sold a baroud recipe to a Venetian trader. A curious monk like Roger Bacon in England might have recorded the formula from an Arabic book and secretly experimented in the dark. Ideas have no borders, and Chinese snow had found its way to Europe. The first explosions in Europe were very weak. In 1326, Venice recorded the use of the first cannons, but they looked nothing like cannons. They were crude metal pots like jars or bells. They were inaccurate, prone to exploding, and often killed the gunner more than the enemy. For a long time, they were considered expensive, noisy, but useless toys. But then, a fateful day arrived. The Battle of August 26, 1346. The Symphony of Iron and Steel. Picture the scene. Northern France, a humid summer day. The French army, numerous and proud, stood before the English army like an impenetrable wall. Their core was heavy cavalry knights in shining plate armor, riding war horses trained for a lifetime. They were the symbol of the old order, of the glory of medieval warfare. On the other side of the battlefield was the English army. Under the command of King Edward III, they were fewer, tired, and forced into a defensive position on a hill. On the surface, they had no chance, but they had two things the French didn't have: thousands of skilled longbowmen and a few crude cannons called ribaldequins. These machines were just small iron tubes on carts firing large arrows or stone shot. Compared to modern artillery, they were a joke, but they weren't there to kill people. The battle began. The French cavalry charged. Thousands of war horses galloped up the hill, the ground shaking. It was a magnificent, terrifying sight, as if the whole world was collapsing under their power. Then, a sound rang out. Boom. Smoke billowed. The smell of sulfur filled the air. Boom, boom. The horses panicked. They neighed, reared, and threw off the knights. The charging formation broke. The explosions didn't kill many. The real damage came from the rain of arrows from the English longbowmen, piercing iron armor like paper. But it was the explosions that sowed fear. They were a declaration. A new era had begun. Imagine you are a French knight, charging up the hill at the Battle of You, have spent your whole life training to become a symbol of honor and strength. You believe nothing can stop you. But then, an explosion rings out. Smoke obscures your vision. Your horse panics, throwing you to the ground. You fall, your heavy armor pressing on your chest. You hear the whistle of arrows, the screams of your comrades. You look up, and for the first time in your life, you feel fear. Not fear of death, but fear that the world you know, the world of swords, armor, and honor, no longer exists. The Battle of was not just a defeat for the French. It was the death knell of an era. It proved that a peasant with a bow, or a gunner operating a noisy machine, could take down a knight trained for a lifetime. Courage and expensive armor were no longer enough. The highest castle walls, the proudest knights, were all about to face the wrath of Chinese snow. If you were a French knight, at hearing the explosions and seeing the smoke from the cannons for the first time, what would you think? Would you think it was magic, demons, or a sign that the world you know was collapsing? Share your thoughts. The small cannons were just the beginning. The first notes of a symphony of iron and steel. They were infants compared to the metal monsters that were about to be born. In the next part, we will witness super cannons that not only took down knights, but also shattered the strongest castle walls, ending an empire that had lasted for over 1,000 years. Let's move on to the fall of Constantinople in part 3. When walls no longer mattered, the first explosions rang out like thunder, shaking the European battlefield in 1346. But those were just scattered notes. a clumsy prelude to the massive symphony of iron and steel and gunpowder that was about to erupt. The early crude cannons, short with bent barrels, were only powerful enough to spook horses, causing the English cavalry to flounder in the mud. They spewed thick black smoke, roaring like ancient beasts, but their power was limited. Enough to shake the enemy's morale, but not yet the true scythe of death. But evolution was rapid, like a fever spreading across the continent. Mysterious blacksmiths and alchemists from the east improved them. Cannon barrels grew longer, bronze stronger, gunpowder more finely mixed. The target was no longer the glittering armored cavalry, but the city walls, the eternal symbols of power and safety in the Middle Ages. The massive stone walls, soaring high, that had witnessed the survival of dynasties, now became the target of a new nightmare. A giant stone cannonball flew through the air, cutting through the howling wind. A deafening explosion, like a lightning strike from hell. A piece of the wall shattered, stone flying everywhere like fragments of a broken dream. It wasn't just broken stone. It was 1,000 years of belief crumbling, the scream of history and transformation. In the Middle Ages, a strong city wall was not just a military structure. It was a living declaration, challenging the outside world. We are here, as steadfast as a mountain. We are safe from all storms. We will endure for generations. Castles, fortresses, and citadels shaped the lives of millions, from humble peasants to arrogant kings. A feudal lord slept soundly behind walls several meters thick, knowing that it would take the enemy months, even years, to dig tunnels, climb ladders, or starve to death in a siege. These walls were symbols of strength, invincibility, built with the sweat, blood, and faith of generations. But then, gunpowder appeared like a ghost from the east, carrying the strong smell of sulfur and a terrifying whisper: nothing is forever. No wall can stand against fire and iron. The change didn't happen everywhere at once. In Europe, it crept through the 100 Years' War, but in mystical lands, new empires rose, building their power on the foundation of gunpowder. They were called the Gunpowder Empires. The mighty Ottomans in the Middle East, the mystical Safavids in Persia, the magnificent mules in India. They didn't just conquer land. They conquered the nature of war, turning it into a game of technology and centralized power. Imagine you are Yusuf, a common soldier in the mighty army of Sultan Mehmed II. You are not just a soldier. You are the arm of destiny, chosen to change the world. You'll remember well the early days, when the bronze monsters, the giant cannons, were dragged by dozens of strong oxen, the tight ropes creaking. Every step made the ground tremble, as if the earth was groaning under the weight of the future. Every time they roared, you felt the ground shake beneath your feet, your heart pounding to the rhythm of the explosion. They were not just weapons, they were the embodiment of the Sultan's will, challenging the 1,000-year-old walls, you wonder. Do those stone walls tremble before this power? Is history rewriting itself with every cannonball you fire? What made the Gunpowder Empires different? They grasped a truth that the world was still groping for in the dark. Gunpowder was not just an auxiliary weapon, toy for the cavalry. It was the center of warfare, the beating heart of the empire. To create giant cannons required a state apparatus with terrifying centralized power. State-run cannon foundries, talented metallurgists from all over, massive logistics corps to transport the tons-heavy monsters across hot deserts or treacherous mountains. A small, feudal lord, with his scattered domains and fragile loyalty, could not dream of such a thing. Only a sultan, a king with absolute power, could mobilize enough resources. From huge taxes to forced labor, to turn the dream of iron and steel into reality. A deafening explosion, like the roar of an angry god. A piece of the wall shatters, stones flying like autumn leaves. Gunpowder didn't just destroy stone. It destroyed the outdated feudal system, clearing the way for centralized empires where kings became living gods and firearms were their scepters. Cannons turned medieval castles, once impregnable, where knights sang and lords feasted, into targets as fragile as glass. And to prove the power of the new era, history chose a grand stage, symbol of immortality. Constantinople, the legendary city where East meets West. Imagine Constantinople in the mid-15th century under the golden Mediterranean sun. This was not just a city. It was the last legacy of the Roman Empire, the heart of Eastern Orthodoxy, the queen of cities. With a population of hundreds of thousands, bustling markets, and magnificent churches like the Hagia Sophia, it was the center of the civilized world. Protecting it were the Theodosian walls, a great defensive marvel. With 3 parallel layers of thick walls, interspersed with deep, water-filled moats, and hundreds of watchtowers soaring like spears to the sky. For over 1,000 years, it stood firm against the fierce Avars, the fanatical Arabs, the greedy Crusaders. This wall was not just stone and mortar, it was a living legend, the pride of a nation, the guarantee of the Byzantine Empire's existence through many historical storms. But across the Bosphorus Strait, where the waves crashed violently, a new enemy appeared like a ghost from hell. A young sultan, Mehmed II, with eyes burning with ambition and an unyielding obsession, to conquer Constantinople, to make it the capital of the mighty Ottoman Empire. Mehmed was not a blind tyrant. He was a brilliant strategist, a brilliant product of the Renaissance. Sharp-witted, fiercely studious, fluent in many languages from Arabic to Greek. From a young age, he was taught that Constantinople was his destiny, the key to Ottoman world domination. He studied every failed siege in history, from the Fourth Crusade to the Arab attempts, and realized that to bring down the immortal Theodosian walls, he needed a weapon of equal legend, something that could tear through stone like paper. A mysterious man appeared under the cold moonlight. A Hungarian engineer named Orban, his eyes glinting with ambition. He brought a deadly promise. A cannon that could bring down the walls of ancient Babylon, turning them to rubble. Orban, a wandering technology mercenary, had once pitched his crazy idea to the Byzantine emperor. But Byzantium, an old and poor empire, could not pay the price for that dream. Orban turned to Mehmed and asked in a seductive whisper, "Do you want a cannon that can bring down the walls of Babylon? A weapon that would make the gods tremble?" Mehmed replied immediately, his voice full of determination. "Yes, I will provide you with all the resources you need. Gold, blacksmiths, and even lives if necessary." In Edirne, the bustling Ottoman capital, giant foundries were erected overnight, fires blazing like a hell on earth. Tons of bronze were melted, black smoke covering the sky. After 3 months of frantic labor, a monster was born, the royal cannon. Or the basilica, a super cannon nearly 9 meters long. With a barrel wide enough for a person to crawl into, firing a stone cannonball weighing over 500 kilograms that could fly for a mile at terrifying speed. To move it required 60 strong oxen and hundreds of sweating soldiers dragging it over muddy roads. It was not just a weapon. It was a giant bronze beast, a challenge sent to the 1,000-year-old walls, a symbol of Ottoman power that would change history forever. Imagine you are Yusuf, standing next to the basilica under the scorching sun, your trembling hands touching the cold bronze. Every time it roared, you felt your chest vibrate, as if your soul was merging with the explosion. It didn't just fire stone cannonballs, it fired the Sultan's dream, the hope of your people. Every cannonball was a resounding declaration: Constantinople will be ours, even if the price is blood and fire. You look at Mehmed, the young sultan, with a mysterious smile and wonder. Are we awakening a demon that will devour the whole world? In April 1453, the siege began like a prolonged nightmare. Imagine you are a Byzantine guard on the Theodosian walls, the salty sea breeze blowing on your face. But your family, your ancestors, had lived under the protection of this wall for generations. It was home, a shield, an eternal symbol. But then, one fateful morning, you look down and see a terrifying sight that makes your blood run cold. An Ottoman army of hundreds of thousands, bayonets glittering in the sun, flags flapping, and among them, the black bronze monsters, their cannons aimed at you like the eyes of death. Boom, boom, boom. The ground shook as if from an earthquake. The stone beneath your feet cracked. A deafening explosion, louder than thunder from the heavens. A giant plume of smoke rose from the cannon's mouth, obscuring the sun. A stone cannonball hurtled forward with deadly speed, crashing into the wall with terrifying force like a punch from Zeus. Stones shattered, flying like shards of glass, dust filling the air. A section of the wall, where your ancestors had stood guard with pride, collapsed in an instant, leaving a gaping hole like a fatal wound. That was just the first shot, but it was like the prelude to hell. The bronze beasts roared incessantly, day after day, week after week, the explosions becoming the heartbeat of destruction. The siege lasted for 53 terrible days, where sleep became a luxury and fear a constant companion. The sound of explosions became the rhythm of life, a constant reminder of the approaching apocalypse. Built mobile towers and bombarded relentlessly, while the Byzantines repaired the walls overnight with trembling hands. Their 1,000-year confidence shattered, along with the once mortal stone walls. Imagine you are Giovanni, a wealthy merchant in Venice, hearing the news of Constantinople's fall while sitting in your office overlooking the sparkling canal. The rumor spread like wildfire through the seaports. The Theodosian walls have fallen. Ottoman cannons tore them apart like paper. People whispered in panic, their faces pale. Constantinople, the great center of trade, the bridge between East and West, where silk, spices, and gold flowed like rivers, had fallen to the Ottomans. Goods from the East would no longer arrive. Prices would skyrocket. Your trading empire would be shaken. You look out at the vast sea, wondering with a gnawing worry. Will we have to find a new route across the endless ocean to survive in this new world? Finally, on May 29, 1453, after a night of fierce bombardment like the wrath of the gods, a large breach appeared like a fatal wound. The Ottoman army poured in like a tide, their shouts echoing through the city. Emperor Constantine XI, the last hero, fought to his last breath like a common soldier, his blood staining his royal robes red. Constantinople fell. The Byzantine Empire, the last legacy of ancient Rome, was wiped out after 1,123 years of glory, leaving a huge void in history. The fall of Constantinople was a psychological shock that spread across Europe like a plague, making kings tremble in their palaces. If the immortal Theodosian walls could fall, then no fortress was safe. From Windsor Castle in England to the citadels in France, the legend of the impregnable fortress died a tragic death, dragging with it the romantic era of knights and fairy tale castles, giving way to the cold, ruthless era of firearms. A stream of refugees from Constantinople fled to Italy like a river, bringing with them the treasures of ancient Greek and Roman knowledge. Books, maps, ideas, helping to ignite the glorious Renaissance where art and science exploded like fireworks. The overland trade route to the east was closed, forcing Europe to seek new sea routes, opening the great age of discovery. Columbus crossing the Atlantic, Vasco da Gama rounding Africa, and a new world discovered with gold and colonies. Deafening explosion, an empire collapsing in dust. A new world born from the ashes, full of promise and peril. Warfare entered a new phase, where gunpowder became the king of the battlefield, dominating every battle. War was no longer a duel of courage and knightly honor. It became a complex technical problem, requiring massive logistics and strict economics. Whoever had more cannons, better cannons, whoever controlled the sources of bronze and sulfur, won. This was the beginning of modern warfare, more brutal than ever, as impersonal as a machine, and terrifyingly industrialized, where humans became cogs in a death machine. The stone walls no longer mattered, just rubble under the power of artillery. Humans had to find new ways to defend themselves, leading to the birth of the elaborate star fort. Designed to withstand bombardment with its sharp angles and sloping walls, gunpowder, from an accidental discovery in the alchemy lab of a Chinese Taoist, is now the great engine of history, overthrowing old empires, creating new ones, changing the fate of millions. Technology always changes the way we live and fight, often in unexpected ways. The Theodosian walls were once the pinnacle of defensive technology for 1,000 years. An immortal symbol, but were neutralized by cannons in just a few weeks. In the modern world, full of technology, the Theodosian walls we trust could be a network firewall, the global economic system, or a fragile peace treaty. And what cannon could bring it down? Artificial intelligence, biological weapons, or an energy revolution? Think and share, because history teaches us nothing is immortal. The world had grown accustomed to black powder, a slow, smoky, and weak powder, like a senile old man on the battlefield. But in the 19th century European laboratories, where the smell of chemicals was strong and the oil lamps flickered, a new demon was being awakened. A clear liquid, as beautiful as crystal, but with just a slight shock, could release terrifying energy, tearing everything around it apart. Its name was nitroglycerin, a liquid nightmare, full of deadly potential. The one who tamed it would become one of the richest men in the world, owning a huge industrial empire, and ironically, his name would be associated with peace. Part 4 will tell the dramatic story of Alfred Nobel, who embraced this demon and changed the world forever. Are you ready for the next storm? The Merchant of Death and the Peace Prize. More than 400 years have passed since Sultan Mehmed II, the great conqueror of the Ottoman Empire, used giant super cannons to shatter the impregnable walls of Constantinople in 1453. It was a historic moment that changed the map of the world, marking the fall of the Byzantine Empire and ushering in the mighty Ottoman era. But ironically, the weapon that created this great change, black powder, had remained almost unchanged over time. It was still a simple, crude mixture of saltpeter, sulfur, and charcoal, ground together according to an ancient ratio. That black powder was weak, inefficient, and every explosion produced thick clouds of smoke that obscured vision, turning the battlefield into a chaotic fog. Black powder was like an old giant, with toned muscles but slow, clumsy, and unpleasantly dirty. It had pushed humanity to the threshold of the modern world, with conquests and ocean explorations, but to truly step through that door, to unlock the endless potential of industry and science, we needed something stronger, more sophisticated, a source of energy that could shake the very foundations of the earth. And the answer did not come from generals on the battlefield with their bloody strategies and the roar of cannons. No, it came from dark laboratories, where curious minds were dissecting the secrets of the universe. The 17th and 18th centuries marked a great revolution in human thought, the Age of Enlightenment, where science emerged from the darkness of superstition and alchemy. Chemistry was no longer a mystical ritual, with alchemists dreaming of turning lead into gold or finding the elixir of life. Now, it was a true science, with precise mathematical laws and measurable, repeatable experimental methods. Scientists like Antoine Lavoisier in France or Joseph Priestley in England were analyzing air, water, and fire, discovering oxygen, hydrogen, and the basic elements. They were dissecting the microscopic structure of matter, asking, why do some substances burst into brilliant flames? Why do some explode with terrifying power? And where is energy truly trapped? In the invisible bonds between molecules, or in the deep secrets of the atom? In the midst of these discoveries, in a Europe booming with the Industrial Revolution, there was an Italian chemist named Ascanio Sobrero. He was not a glamorous hero, not an adventurer on the battlefield. Sobrero was a quiet, meticulous man, with thick glasses and a graying beard. Born in 1812 in Casale Monferrato, he studied chemistry at the University of Turin and became an assistant to renowned professors. In 1847, in his small laboratory in Turin, a cramped room with sparkling glass flasks and a strong smell of chemicals, Sobrero was conducting a purely scientific experiment, with no intention of creating weapons or making a profit. He carefully dripped glycerin, a sweet, viscous liquid, a byproduct of soap and candle making, into a mixture of concentrated nitric acid and sulfuric acid, cooled to control the reaction. The result was a strange new liquid, pale yellow, seemingly harmless like olive oil, with an oily and sticky texture. Sombrero named it pyroglycerin, meaning glycerin of fire, but the world would later know it as nitroglycerin, a word that evokes destructive power, curious and cautious. Sombrero began to study its properties. Following the dangerous habit of chemists of that era, he even tasted a small drop. Sweet taste spread on his tongue, but was immediately followed by a severe headache, as if someone was hitting his temples with a hammer. Then he tried heating a small drop over a flame. Bang, a sharp, deafening explosion, more powerful than anything he had ever seen from black powder. That sound was not just an explosion, it was a warning from hell. Sombrero was deeply shocked, his heart pounding in his chest. He continued his experiments, but his fear grew. This liquid was extremely unstable, like a hibernating monster, ready to awaken with any small stimulus. It didn't need fire to detonate. A strong impact from a metal spoon. A sudden temperature change from the Italian summer sun, sometimes for no apparent reason at all. It could explode with terrifying destructive power, tearing everything around it to shreds. In an accidental experiment, a test tube containing nitroglycerin suddenly exploded, sharp glass shards embedding themselves in his face and hands, leaving permanent scars and a lingering obsession. Ascanio Sombrero, who had accidentally given birth to this demon from his laboratory, was horrified by the very child he had created. He realized that he had opened a Pandora's box, unleashing an energy beyond human control. Instead of boasting about his great invention, Sombrero wrote to friends and colleagues across Europe with a worried and urgent tone of warning. He wrote, "I strongly advise you not to try to repeat this experiment. It is too dangerous. It could take the life of anyone who dares to touch it." He felt a deep sense of guilt, like a father who had to disown his monstrous child, sensing the terrible tragedies that this deadly liquid would cause in the future. Accidental explosions, senseless deaths, and perhaps bloodier wars than ever before. Sombrero even kept the formula a secret for years, hoping that the world would forget his cursed invention. But history never allows such a demon to be buried once it has been released from the glass jar. There will always be those who are brave or ambitious enough to try to tame it, to turn it into a tool for their own purposes. And that person appeared with the name Alfred Nobel, a name that will forever be associated with both creation and destruction. Alfred Nobel was the complete opposite of Sombrero. Born in 1833 in Stockholm, Sweden, into a family of engineers and inventors, Nobel was not only a talented chemist, but also a mechanical engineer, a tireless inventor with over 350 patents, and a visionary entrepreneur who always saw opportunity in great risks. The Nobel family had been in the arms and explosives business since his father, Emmanuel Nobel, supplied naval mines to the Russian army during the Crimean War. Alfred grew up amidst the strong smell of gunpowder, the echoing explosions from test workshops and stories of the power of science. When he heard about Sombrero's nitroglycerin through scientific journals, he did not see the horror that Sombrero described. Instead, he saw a golden opportunity, a source of energy that could change the world, from construction to warfare. Nobel was obsessed with its power, believing that if he could control that demon, he would become a hero of humanity. Nobel's journey was a long road full of tragedy and sacrifice, like a Greek tragedy where the hero must face a dark fate. He traveled across Europe, learning from leading scientists, and established factories to produce nitroglycerin on a large scale, despite its deadly instability. But disaster did not wait long. A series of explosions occurred at the factories, killing workers and destroying property. The most horrific tragedy struck on September 3, 1864, when his family's factory in Heleneborg, a suburb of Stockholm, suddenly exploded like a giant bomb. The explosion spread, leveling the entire area, creating a dark cloud of smoke that covered the sky. 5 people were killed, including Emil Nobel, his youngest brother, only 21 years old, a promising young man who was helping his brother with his work. Alfred, who was lucky to escape because he was not there, but the pain of that loss was like a deep knife cut to his heart. That pain might have broken an ordinary person, making them give up their dreams and bury the past. But not Nobel. The tragedy only strengthened his iron determination, like a fire tempering steel. He threw himself into research more frantically than ever, testing hundreds of different ways to tame the nitroglycerin demon, to make it obey human commands. He mixed nitroglycerin with black powder, with finely ground brick dust, with charcoal, and a host of other absorbents, but all failed. The liquid was still too dangerous to transport, easily exploding on the rough roads of 19th century Europe. And then, in 1867, in a moment that is said to be accidental but was probably the result of thousands of hours of failed experiments, Nobel found the fateful answer. While transporting a batch of nitroglycerin from his factory in Germany, a few barrels leaked due to impact. The deadly liquid seeped out and was absorbed by a type of porous earth used to line the barrels to prevent slipping. It was diatomaceous earth, a soft, porous sedimentary rock formed from the fossilized shells of millions of tiny algae from the bottom of ancient oceans. Nobel, with the keen eye of an inventor, immediately realized. When absorbed by diatomaceous earth, nitroglycerin turned into a surprisingly stable, moist paste. It could be molded into cylindrical sticks, transported safely over thousands of miles, and most importantly, it would not explode without a special detonator. Another of Nobel's own inventions, using silver fulminate to trigger the reaction, he had succeeded brilliantly. He had tamed the demon, turning it from an indiscriminate killer into a tool for humanity. Alfred Nobel called his invention dynamite, inspired by the ancient Greek word dunamis, meaning power. A perfect name for this new weapon. And dynamite did indeed unleash an unprecedented source of power in human history. For the first time, explosives were no longer just weapons of war, but became a great tool of construction and creation. Changing the face of the planet, dynamite became the silent hero of the Second Industrial Revolution. It blasted through hard granite mountain ranges to build the Gotthard Tunnel through the Alps, allowing trains to run across the European continent, connecting countries and boosting trade. It broke up huge rocks to dig the Suez Canal in 1869, connecting the Mediterranean Sea with the Indian Ocean, shortening sea routes by thousands of miles. It even participated in the challenging Panama Canal project, helping to connect the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. Dynamite went deep into the earth, mining coal, iron ore, and gold, providing energy and raw materials for the giant factories in England, Germany, and the United States. It accelerated the pace of civilization's development at a dizzying speed, turning science fiction dreams into reality. From high-speed railways to the first skyscrapers, thanks to dynamite and related inventions, Alfred Nobel became unimaginably wealthy. He built a global empire with hundreds of factories in more than 20 countries, from Sweden to the United States, from Russia to South Africa, with over 350 patents, including the safety detonator and smokeless powders like ballastite. Nobel became a symbol of scientific progress and entrepreneurial spirit. He lived the life of a modern aristocrat, traveling the world, owning villas in Paris and San Remo, and mingling with the European elite. But behind that glamour was an undeniable truth, a shadow that always loomed. The power of dynamite was dual use. It built, but it also destroyed. While it was blasting mountains and digging rivers for peace, it was also quickly being used in the military, turning into a tool of death on a new scale. Dynamite was packed into artillery shells, into submarine torpedoes, into the first bombs, creating a destructive force many times greater than black powder. Ballastite, a smokeless powder that Nobel invented in 1887, revolutionized firearms, allowing for continuous fire without being obscured by smoke. The ability to kill on a mass scale increased frighteningly, paving the way for modern wars with huge casualties. Nobel lived with that paradox his entire life. He was a lover of literature and poetry, a pacifist humanist who wrote lyrical poems and supported social movements. But his huge fortune was built on inventions that could cause horrific death, from colonial wars to internal conflicts in Europe. He once said, "I hope that my inventions will benefit humanity," but deep down, he knew that the demon he had tamed could still turn and bite. And then, in 1888, that paradox came back to haunt him in the most direct way, like a curse from the past. His brother, Ludwig Nobel, died of a heart attack in Cannes, France. A French newspaper, in a terrible mistake, published the wrong obituary, thinking that the deceased was Alfred. The large headline on the front page of the newspaper that day in bold black print read, "Le Marchand de la Mort est mort." The merchant of death is dead. They described him as a war profiteer, a cold-blooded merchant who had grown rich on the suffering of humanity. Imagine how Alfred Nobel felt reading those words on a peaceful morning in Paris. He sat there, perfectly healthy, his coffee still hot on the table, yet he was reading his own eulogy, not as a great inventor, not as the man who had helped build the modern world, but as the merchant of death, the one who had sold his soul to the god of war. The shock was like a dynamite bomb exploding in his mind, causing him to collapse completely. He was haunted by the nagging question, is this how people will remember me? A legacy of blood and smoke? In long, sleepless nights, Nobel reflected on his life, on the anonymous victims that his invention had indirectly caused, and on the responsibility of a scientist for the power they unleash. And in the last years of his life, living in solitude and contemplation, Alfred Nobel decided to make one final invention. Perhaps his greatest, most profound invention. In 1895, he wrote a new will at the Swedish-Norwegian Club in Paris, in which he dedicated the majority of his enormous fortune, about 94%, equivalent to over 31 million Swedish kronor, to establish a special fund. Annually, the interest from this fund would be used to award prizes to individuals or organizations who had made the most outstanding contributions to humanity in the fields of physics, chemistry, physiology, or medicine, literature, and especially peace. The Nobel Prize was born from this, with the first award ceremony in 1901, honoring great minds like Marie Curie, Albert Einstein, and Martin Luther King Jr., the Nobel Peace Prize. Funded by money earned from dynamite and weapons, is perhaps the most beautiful and profound paradox in this entire historical story. It was the final effort of a man to atone for his mistakes, to rewrite his own legacy from the ashes of the past. It was an admission that the same scientific mind that created a tool of destruction could also honor efforts to build peace, to push humanity towards a better future. But was it enough? Was Nobel truly forgiven? Or will he forever be a symbol of the conflict between progress and morality? What do you think of Alfred Nobel, hypocritical arms dealer, covering his sins with glamorous awards? Or a truly repentant man, using his huge legacy to compensate for the negative impacts of his invention, from accidental explosions to millions of lives lost in war? Is the Nobel Peace Prize, with recipients like Malala Yousafzai or Nelson Mandela, enough to erase the title Merchant of Death that the world once gave him? Or is it just a thin coat of paint covering a dark truth? Nobel had tamed nitroglycerin and opened the era of industrial explosives. But his scientific heirs went even further, pushing the limits of destructive power to an unimaginable degree. They would create a new family of superior explosives, with cold, mysterious acronyms like TNT, RDX, PETN, stronger, more stable, and easier to mass-produce than dynamite by far. But did you know that these substances were not just construction tools, but were about to become the fuel for global-scale slaughterhouses? They would turn the muddy trenches of France into a hell on earth in World War I, with poison gas and delayed action bombs. They would level entire ancient cities in World War II, from London to Hiroshima. And behind that were even darker secrets. Secret laboratories, scientists bound by war, and inventions that could wipe out humanity in the blink of an eye. Let's explore Part 5, where explosives are no longer tools, but the fuel for total wars, where the line between hero and villain is forever blurred. Do you dare to look into that darkness? A symphony of destruction. The history of explosives is not a story that begins in modern laboratories with sophisticated equipment and scientists in white coats. Instead, it originates from ancient alchemy labs in 9th century China, where alchemists, in pursuit of the dream of immortality, accidentally discovered a strange mixture of saltpeter, charcoal, and sulfur. They called this brightly burning powder fire medicine, initially used only to create brilliant light effects in folk festivals, like fireworks exploding in the sky at night. However, its hidden power was quickly recognized and transformed into crude weapons. Rockets whizzing from bamboo tubes, hand-thrown grenades that exploded, and even the first cannons with a roar like thunder. Black powder, as it came to be known, completely changed the face of warfare. Shifting from heroic hand-to-hand combat with swords and spears to long-range artillery bombardments, where death came from hundreds of meters away, from the vast conquests of the Mongol Empire under Genghis Khan, where gunpowder helped them conquer Asia and Europe, to the fierce naval battles of Renaissance Europe. With warships bombarding each other with cannons, gunpowder spread throughout the world like a firestorm, carrying the power of fire and thick black smoke. But no matter how powerful, the strength of black powder still had clear limitations. It was easily rendered useless by moisture, burned slowly so it did not create a strong propulsive force, and was not powerful enough to radically alter terrain, only to cause localized damage. It was not until the 19th century, when the Swedish inventor Alfred Nobel entered the historical stage, that things truly changed. He tamed nitroglycerin, a dangerously explosive liquid that could detonate with just a slight impact. By combining it with Kieselguhr clay, creating dynamite, a stable, easily controlled, and more powerful explosive than anything that had existed before. Dynamite was not just a technical invention. It was the key that opened the industrial era of destruction, allowing humanity to harness the power of nature for destructive or constructive purposes, depending on their will. But science, with its relentless progress, never stopped at dynamite or any other achievement. In the following decades, chemists around the world continued to perfect Nobel's work, creating a new family of explosives with superior power, greater stability, and more diverse applications. First among them was TNT, invented in 1863 by the German chemist Joseph Wilbrand. But it was not until the early 20th century that it was widely used in military and industrial applications. TNT was notable for its incredible stability, being able to withstand strong impacts without detonating, and especially its ability to be melted at a low temperature of about 80 degrees Celsius, and then poured into molds to be shaped. This made it the ideal choice for mass production of artillery shells, bombs, and mines. The power of TNT was measured by a detonation velocity of up to 6,900 meters per second, twice that of traditional black powder, creating a propulsive force and shock wave that could tear through metal and concrete. Next was RDX, also known as cyclonite, or hexogen, developed by British scientists in the 1930s as part of the war preparation effort. With a detonation velocity of up to 8,750 meters per second, RDX was about 1.5 times more powerful than TNT, and was often mixed with wax or plastic to create composition B, a flexible plastic explosive widely used in bombs, rockets, and other explosive devices. Not to be outdone, PETN was even more powerful with a velocity of 8,400 meters per second and was used in detonating cords. Long explosive fuses used to trigger a chain of simultaneous explosions or in sophisticated detonators. These explosives were no longer crude mixtures made by hand in small workshops. They were the products of modern industrial chemistry, mass-produced in giant factories with automated production lines, where the smokestacks emitted not just the smoke of scientific progress, but also the prelude to global-scale massacres. With millions of tons of explosives stored in the arsenals of nations, the real explosion of these advanced explosives came with World War I. Tragic conflict were outdated. 19th century tactical thinking, with its frontal infantry assaults, collided violently with the destructive technology of the 20th century. The result was an unprecedented human tragedy, with a total casualty count of about 40 million people, 15 to 22 million killed. of which 8.5 to 9.7 million were soldiers who died on the battlefield, and 6.8 to 8 million civilians who died of starvation, rampant disease, and war-related violence. This number surpassed all previous wars combined, from the legendary conquests of Alexander the Great in Asia with hundreds of thousands dead, through the large-scale battles of Napoleon in Europe with millions of casualties, to the American Civil War with about 620,000 dead. The total number of deaths in the history of warfare before WWI is estimated to be around 4 to 5 million military personnel, but WWI multiplied that by 4 to 5 times in just 4 short years. Artillery, with shells filled with TNT and similar explosives, became the king of the battlefield, dominating every engagement. Imagine the Battle of the Somme in 1916 in northern France. The British Army fired over 1.7 million artillery shells in 1 week, creating deep craters, turning green fields into a pockmarked moonscape of craters and mud. The tragic result: over 1 million casualties in this battle alone, with 60,000 British soldiers killed or wounded on the first day of the attack, as they charged out of their trenches and faced machine guns and relentless artillery fire. Or the Battle of Verdun, which lasted for 10 months from February to December 1916, with an estimated 700,000 to 1 million deaths, mostly from incessant artillery bombardments, where the sound of explosions echoed day and night like a hellish symphony. Artillery barrages lasting for hours, even days, not only killed people but also caused shell shock, the post-traumatic stress disorder we now call PTSD, affecting hundreds of thousands of soldiers, causing them to tremble uncontrollably, lose their memory, and be haunted by the echoing explosions in their heads. Explosives had turned war from a heroic test of courage into a senseless slaughter, where death came from the sky in the form of a rain of shells, not from the blade of a sword or the point of a spear. If World War I turned Europe into a muddy graveyard with trenches stretching for thousands of kilometers, World War II pushed destruction to a global scale, with the concept of total war completely blurring the line between military and civilian targets, turning every citizen into a part of the war machine. The total death toll reached 70 to 85 million people. 21 to 25 million military personnel died on the fronts, and 50 to 55 million civilians were killed by bombs, famine, genocide, and disease, twice as many as in WWI, and making it the bloodiest war in human history. Explosives were no longer confined to the ground. They were carried into the sky by strategic bombers, turning the air into a new battlefield. The Blitz in London in 1942, 1941 is a prime example. The German Air Force dropped over 20,000 tons of bombs containing TNT, RDX, and other explosives, killing about 40,000 civilians, destroying thousands of homes and historical landmarks, and plunging the city into fire and smoke for months. On the other side, the bombing of Dresden in 1945 by the Allied forces dropped 3,900 tons of bombs, creating a massive firestorm that incinerated the entire ancient city, killing 25,000 people in a single night. With temperatures reaching thousands of degrees Celsius, Tokyo in 1945 witnessed a similar tragedy. Firebombs containing napalm, a flammable explosive based on gasoline and a sticky gel, were dropped, killing over 100,000 civilians and burning tens of square kilometers of traditional Japanese wooden houses. And the pinnacle of destruction was the atomic bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945. Based on nuclear fission but equivalent to thousands of tons of conventional TNT, the little boy bomb in Hiroshima had a yield of 15 kilotons of TNT, instantly killing about 70,000 people, with the total death toll rising to 140,000 due to radiation, severe burns, and long-term illnesses. The Fat Man bomb in Nagasaki was similar with 21 kilotons, compared to ancient wars, such as the Battle of Cannae in 216 BC, with 50,000 deaths in one day, or the American Civil War, with a total of 620,000 deaths. World War II multiplied the death toll by tens of times thanks to the power of industrial explosives, turning war into an unprecedentedly efficient killing machine. The consequences of explosives did not end with the cold death tolls on paper. Environmentally, artillery bombardments and bombings caused severe pollution of land, water, and air, leaving a toxic legacy that has lasted for generations. In WWI, artillery fire on the Western Front released tons of arsenic, lead, mercury, and other toxic substances from munitions, contaminating agricultural land in France and Belgium to the extent that residues still remain today, causing cases of cancer, birth defects, and health disorders among the local population. In World War II, the atomic bombs left radiation in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, leading to thousands of cases of cancer, leukemia, and genetic defects for decades after, with subsequent generations still being affected. In terms of human health, shell shock in WWI led to hundreds of thousands of cases of mental disorders, with soldiers returning home never fully recovering, while in World War II, injuries from bombs caused limb loss, blindness, severe burns, and permanent disabilities for millions of people, requiring the global healthcare system to cope for years. The natural environment was also heavily devastated. Forests were burned by firebombs. Rivers and lakes were polluted by rusted metal debris and leaking chemicals, leading to loss of biodiversity, land degradation, and even local climate change due to smoke and dust covering the sky. In today's modern world, explosives continue to be used with two surprisingly opposite faces, reflecting the dual nature of human technology. Militarily advanced explosives such as HMXC4 or ammonium nitrate have been integrated into the most modern weapons. Tomahawk cruise missiles containing up to 450 kilograms of explosives. JAM smart bombs with GPS guidance for meter-level accuracy, or drone munitions. Small bombs attached to unmanned aerial vehicles, which have revolutionized asymmetric warfare in regions like the Middle East, Iraq, Afghanistan, and recently Ukraine, where cheap drones can destroy expensive tanks. IEDs, particularly common in Iraq and Afghanistan, have caused over 50% of U.S. military casualties, with ammonium nitrate as the main explosive, easily obtained from agricultural fertilizers. Conversely, in the civilian sector, explosives are used positively in mining, building giant tunnels, safely demolishing high-rise buildings, and even in emergency rescue. Globally, the blasting industry uses over 5 million tons of explosives each year, contributing to the construction of modern infrastructure, from highways to hydroelectric dams, helping to boost the economy and improve lives. However, misuse or negligence still leads to catastrophic accidents. The 2020 Beirut explosion with 2,750 tons of unsafely stored ammonium nitrate killed 218 people, injured thousands more, and destroyed a large part of the city, reminding us of the potential risks when handling these substances. In the total wars of the 20th century, the line between legitimate military targets and innocent civilians was systematically blurred, leading to fierce debates about the ethics of war. In my opinion, the concept of war crimes still exists and needs to be upheld, as even if the ultimate goal is victory, actions deliberately targeting civilians, such as the strategic bombing of Dresden or the atomic bombing of Hiroshima, violated fundamental humanitarian principles, such as the 1906 Geneva Convention and its later versions, which emphasized the protection of civilians and prisoners of war. Not all forms of destruction can be justified by strategic reasons. Military victory cannot erase moral responsibility, and history has shown that such actions often lead to a prolonged cycle of hatred, undermining the foundation of long-term peace. We have just passed through the darkest chapter in the history of explosives, witnessing it become a tool for industrial-scale slaughter. From artillery bombardments to atomic bombs, it is difficult to find a ray of light in this story of blood and fire, where millions of lives were taken by the power of chemistry. But the same power that leveled cities and turned a continent into rubble in the same century was also being harnessed to cut through mountains, dam rivers, and build the solid foundation of the modern world we live in today, from great bridges to the mineral mines that fuel our economy. In the next part, we will confront the two surprisingly opposite faces of explosives, an unforgiving destroyer and a resilient creator, exploring how the same technology can bring both death and life. The builder and the killer. We have just crossed the threshold of hell. We've witnessed bloody trenches, cities engulfed in flames, and the terrifying shadow of the mushroom cloud, where hundreds of thousands of lives vanished in an instant. The story of explosives, from the first bullets to the atomic bomb, seems to be a one-way street to destruction. An invention born to sow death. But let's pause for a moment. What if I told you that the very same terrifying power, the brutal energy that tore the sky apart, is the silent hero behind the modern world we live in? What if I told you that in this story, explosives are not just a destroyer, but also a great builder, a giant engineer who has shaped our planet? Let's put aside the smoke-filled battlefields. Instead, look around you. The skyscraper where you are standing, smooth asphalt road you walk on every day, and the smartphone in your hand connecting you to the whole world. The electricity that lights your home. All of these things, in one way or another, are built on the foundation of controlled explosions. Explosives are not just weapons. They are the tool that has carved the face of modern civilization. Let's begin this journey by going deep into the earth. Our civilization is a huge machine, always hungry for resources. Coal to heat our homes, iron ore to forge steel, copper to conduct electricity, and rare metals to create the tiny but powerful chips in your phone. But these resources are not scattered on the surface of the earth. They are buried under millions of tons of hard rock, deep in dark mines. How do we get them out? Explosives are the answer. Imagine a team of miners in the 19th century, standing before a giant cliff. No modern machinery, no laser technology, only sweat, pickaxes, and explosives. A carefully calculated explosion can crack open an entire mountain, opening paths to the treasures hidden deep inside. From the coal mines of England to the gold mines of South Africa, explosives became the right hand of the mining industry, supplying the raw materials to build the Industrial Revolution. But that's not all. After extracting the resources, we need to connect the world. Nature, in its majestic beauty, is a formidable opponent. Towering mountain ranges separate cities. Wide rivers divide communities. And once again, explosives spoke up. Engineers with the drill and blast technique used explosives to cut through the heart of mountains, creating great tunnels like the Gotthard Tunnel in Switzerland or the Simplon Tunnel connecting Europe. Controlled explosions opened up paths that people had only dreamed of before. Think of the giant hydroelectric dams, like the Hoover Dam in the United States, or the Three Gorges Dam in China. These structures not only provide electricity to millions of people, but also control the flow of fierce rivers, preventing floods and creating arable land. But to build them, people had to face huge rock masses and untamable rivers. Explosives broke down those obstacles, allowing us to reshape the landscape of the planet itself. From digging the foundations for the skyscrapers of New York to creating the deep water ports of Singapore, explosives are the diligent, tireless builder. Without them, there would be no great bridges spanning oceans, no canals like the Panama Canal connecting to oceans, and no modern cities shining with lights. Simply put, without explosives, there would be no world as you know it today. But we cannot turn a blind eye to the other face of explosives. The same chemical reaction that broke rock to build a dam when placed in a bomb can level a city. The same energy that dug tunnels to connect communities can create mass graves in an instant. We saw the peak of destruction in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, where nuclear explosions, the direct descendants of explosives, turned hundreds, thousands of lives to ash in seconds. Bustling cities with homes, schools, and hospitals were left with nothing but charred shadows imprinted on the walls. But don't be mistaken that this story of destruction belongs only to the past. Today, modern explosives like C4 or RDX-based compounds have become more fearsome weapons than ever before. They are compact, stable, and have terrifying destructive power. In the hands of a special forces team, they can be used to destroy a fortified bunker. But in the hands of a terrorist, just a few kilograms of C4 hidden. in a backpack is enough to turn a peaceful morning at a crowded train station into a nightmare. A small explosion can paralyze an entire city, not just because of the physical damage, but because of the fear it sows. Think of the terrorist attacks of the 21st century that improvised explosive devices. The explosions in markets, train stations, or airports. Explosives do not distinguish purpose. It doesn't know who is holding it or why. It does only one thing: destroy. And in that moment, the line between the builder and the killer becomes more fragile than ever. The story of explosives is the story of the clearest and most extreme dual-use nature in human history. Almost every invention can be abused. A knife can cut bread or be a weapon. An airplane can carry passengers or become a tool of war. But with explosives, this duality reaches its peak. The act of exploding is fundamentally an act of destruction. The only difference is the user's intention. Breaking a rock to build a road, or destroying a building full of innocent people chemically, they are exactly the same. The life of Alfred Nobel, the inventor of dynamite, is the embodiment of this conflict. Nobel created dynamite with the hope of helping humanity conquer nature to build great works. But he also had to witness how his invention was used for slaughter on the battlefield. His pain over this dual legacy led him to establish the Nobel Prizes with the hope of promoting the good values of humanity's science, peace, and progress. But even the Nobel Prizes cannot erase the paradox. The thing that helps us build can also destroy us. Explosives are not just a chemical compound. They are a mirror, reflecting the dual nature of humanity. We have the ability to build great works, gleaming cities, bridges connecting continents, tunnels through the earth, but we also have the ability to wage brutal wars where millions pay with their lives. Explosives did not create these things. They are just an amplifier. They make our constructions greater and our destruction more complete. Today, we are on the threshold of new dual-use inventions, more powerful than explosives. Artificial intelligence can revolutionize medicine, education, and transportation, but it can also be used to create privacy-invading surveillance systems or lethal autonomous weapons. Genetic engineering can cure diseases, improve crops, but it can also be abused to create dangerous organisms or biological inequality. How do we navigate these technologies more wisely? The history of explosives teaches us that no invention is neutral. Every tool carries within it the potential for both creation and destruction. What matters is our intention and how we manage those tools. We need rules, ethical values, and a clear vision to ensure that our inventions serve progress, not destruction. So, what is the legacy of explosives? Is the builder who has dug deep into the earth, broken the barriers of nature, and built a modern world? But it is also the killer who has sown terror and left indelible scars on human history. And finally, what does it say about us? Who created it? Perhaps explosives are a reminder that with great power comes great responsibility. It challenges us to choose. Will we be builders or killers? Will we use our inventions to build or to destroy? To answer that question, we must return to where it all began, with the ancient Taoists who sought not power but immortality. They accidentally created something that changed the world. And now, with the heirs of that fire, must decide what to do with it. The reflecting mirror. We have reached the end of a long and emotional journey. It's a journey that began in alchemy labs hidden in the mountains, where ancient Taoists dreamed of immortality. We have crossed fiery battlefields, where explosives became the roar of war. We have entered laboratories, where humans split the atom and created terrifying power. And we have stood under the dark shadow of the mushroom cloud, where humanity faced the possibility of its own self-destruction. Now, standing at this final point, we must ask ourselves, what is the true legacy of explosives? What does this story, spanning over a millennium, say about us, the ones who created it, used it, and live in the world it has shaped? To answer, we must return to where it all began, with a simple yet haunting question: who really invented explosives? The answer, as we now know, was not a general, a scientist, or a conqueror. It was a group of ancient Chinese Taoists who sought not power or destruction. They desired only one very human thing: to conquer death. In their smoky alchemy labs, they mixed saltpeter, sulfur, and charcoal, hoping to find the elixir of life. But instead of immortality, they accidentally created something that would change human history: gunpowder. History, as usual, has a cruel sense of humor. The thing created to prolong life became the tool that brought death faster than any previous invention. From the first fire arrows on ancient Chinese battlefields, to the cannons of the Ottoman Empire, and finally the atomic bomb exploding over Hiroshima, explosives have become a symbol of destruction. The dream of immortality gave birth to a nightmare. But the story does not end there. Explosives are not just a tool of war. They are also the force behind great works: hydroelectric dams, tunnels through mountains, modern cities. And it is this contradiction between creation and destruction that has turned explosives into more than just an invention. It is a mirror. This is not an ordinary mirror. It is cruel, honest, and unforgiving. When we look at the history of explosives, we don't just see events or technology. We see ourselves, our aspirations, our fears, and the deep contradictions in human nature. In that mirror, three faces appear clearly. The first face is the Creator. This is the best part of us, the desire to conquer nature, to turn the wild world into a place where we can live and thrive. The Creator is the engineer who used explosives to break rocks, build dams, and dig tunnels, creating works like the Panama Canal or the Three Gorges Dam. But the Creator is not just a great builder. It is also you when you plant a tree, fix a house, or create something with your own hands. It is the desire to build a better world, to leave a legacy for future generations. Think of the highways connecting continents, the suspension bridges spanning oceans, or the skyscrapers reaching for the sky. They all bear the mark of the Creator, and explosives were the tool that helped them turn dreams into reality. But the mirror does not only reflect light. The second face is the Conqueror. This is the darker part of us, the desire to impose our will, to force others to submit. The Conqueror is Sultan Mehmed II, who used super cannons to conquer Constantinople, opening a new era for the Ottoman Empire. It is Napoleon, with his armies equipped with firearms, conquering Europe. But the Conqueror does not only exist in history. It can be any of us when we argue to win, when we try to impose our opinions on others, or when we let pride overcome reason. Explosives gave the Conqueror unprecedented power. From fire arrows to ballistic missiles, it has turned wars from duels into large-scale massacres. But the Conqueror is not the final face. The third face, and the most terrifying, is the Destroyer. This is rage, hatred, and the ability to obliterate everything. The Destroyer is the atomic bomb exploding over Hiroshima and Nagasaki, turning hundreds of thousands of lives to ash. It is the terrorist bombings of the 21st century, where a few kilograms of C4 can turn a peaceful morning into a nightmare. But the Destroyer does not only exist in the horrific moments of history. It can be any of us in a moment of lost control, when anger or pain makes us want to destroy everything. These three faces, the Creator, the Conqueror, and the Destroyer, live in each of us. Explosives did not create them. They're just an amplifying tool, giving our aspirations and emotions a power beyond imagination. And this is what makes explosives special. It has no will of its own. It is neither good nor evil. It only reflects what we choose to do with it. In 2025, the story of explosives is not just a chapter in a history book. It is a warning and also a lesson for our time. Because we are constantly creating new explosives dual use, technologies that carry the potential for both creation and destruction. Think of artificial intelligence. An algorithm can analyze medical images to detect cancer early, saving millions of lives. But that same algorithm, if used in an autonomous weapon system, could order an attack without human intervention, causing unforeseeable consequences. AI, like explosives, is a mirror. It reflects the intentions of those who create and use it. Gene editing technology like CRISPR is no different. It promises a future where genetic diseases like cancer or heart disease can be eradicated. But it also raises terrifying questions. What happens if this technology falls into the hands of those who want to design humans according to their will? What happens if it is used to create biological weapons, with a destructive power far exceeding even the atomic bomb? And then there is energy technology. Nuclear energy, a direct descendant of explosives, can provide clean electricity to billions of people, mitigating climate change. But it can also become a bomb that destroys entire civilizations. The nuclear reactors at Chernobyl or Fukushima are reminders that even when used with good intentions, the power of technology can still get out of control. Each of these technologies is a new mirror, reflecting ourselves back at us. They do not decide their own fate. The ones who create control and use them are the ones who decide. The legacy of explosives lies not just in great works or bloody battlefields. It lies in the lesson it leaves behind. Humanity's greatest power is not the ability to create fire, split the atom, or build intelligent machines. The greatest power, and also the greatest burden, is the right to choose. Every day, with every technology we create and use, we stand at a crossroads. Will we be creators, using our power to build a better world? Or will we be conquerors, imposing our will on others? Or worse, will we be destroyers, letting anger and fear lead us to destruction? The story began more than 1,000 years ago in an alchemy lab with a dream of immortality. That dream failed, but it left us with an unexpected legacy, a mirror reflecting both the light and darkness in the human soul. And every time we stand before a new technology, from artificial intelligence to gene editing, we face the same question that history has posed. Who will we be? If you want to continue this journey, to look into other mirrors of history with me, stories of inventions, dreams, and the choices that have shaped the world, stay with Sleepless Mind. Let's discover together who we really are and what we can become in the future.
You've crossed the story. You felt every pulse in the dark, and I was there with you, quietly, always. That's why I left behind one last thing. Not to explain, not to impress, just to stay with you a little longer. A song I chose with care, as if tucking you in from across time and space. So go on, lay back, the music knows where to take you. you're still here, then you're something rare. Not many stay this long. So, thank you for choosing to stay. I'm here too, still awake, surrounded by the quiet glow of my editing screen, shaping the next stories just for you. If there's anything you want to leave behind, a whisper, a suggestion, even just a symbol, drop it in the comments. Because maybe, tomorrow night, you'll hear yourself echoed in a story that's never been told before. still here, even now? I have a feeling part of you is still wandering somewhere between wakefulness and dreaming. I know that feeling well because I'm still awake with you. In a quiet room, I'm gently laying out layers of sound, each breath, each beat, preparing the next journey we'll take together. If you're still listening, leave me a sign. Let me know how you're feeling or just where you are in this vast world. Because right now, in this stillness, you are not alone. You're still there, aren't you? I can't see you, but I can feel you. Like a soft signal pulsing across the silence. Over here, I'm still working, refining layers of sound, rewriting fragments of voice, building the landscape for our next adventure. One that you might inspire. If an idea comes to you, share it with me. Comment below. A theme, a memory, a strange dream. I read every word because I never tell these stories alone. I tell them with you.